Welcome students. In this video, we will learn Chapter 1 of CBSE Class 9, Matter in Our Surroundings. We will learn Part 3 of this chapter. Part 3 is Characteristics of Particle of Matter. So let's start. Characteristics of Particles of Matter. There are three main characteristics of particles of matter. First characteristic is particles of matter have space between them. According to these characteristics, that there is a space between the particles of matter. Means matter is not continuous. There is space between the particles of matter. Second characteristic says that particles of matter are continuously moving. According to this characteristic, particles of matter are not static. They are not fixed to one place, but they are continuously moving. And third characteristic is particles of matter attract each other. There is an attraction between the particles of matter. This is the third characteristic. We will learn these characteristics in detail with the help of some simple activities. So let's start. Particles of matter have space between them. This is the first characteristic of particles of matter. Let us perform an activity to study this characteristic. Take one glass beaker and take some water in that beaker. We can see this water here. This is the magnified view of water. We can see the particles of matter in this figure. These are the particles of water or the particles of matter. Water is a matter. So these are the particles of water. And now we have to add some salt into this water. We have added salt into this water. Now we have to stir this with the help of this rod. After having stirred this mixture, we will get the solution. We will get this solution of water and salt. What we observe in this activity that the level of this solution of water and salt is same as that of the level of this water. So why this has happened? The level in the solution, the level of the solution in this beaker has not risen because the space between the particles of water has been occupied by the particles of salt. These are the particles of salt. These yellow color dots are the particles of salt. So these particles of salt have occupied the space between the particles of water. So we can clearly see, we can clearly conclude that particles of matter have space between them. So conclusion from this activity is there is enough space between the particles of matter. Particles of matter are continuously moving. This is the second characteristic of a particle of matter. Let us perform an activity 1 to study this characteristic of particle. In this activity, we are going to use incense sticks. When these incense sticks are not ignited, we have to go closer to it to smell the fragrance of these incense sticks. We have to take our nose close to these sticks to smell the fragrance of it. But when these incense sticks are ignited, we can smell the fragrance of these incense sticks from the distance. We can smell the fragrance of it from longer distance. Why it has happened in this case? The answer to this question is, when we ignite the incense sticks, the particles of a fragrance move faster than the particles when the incense sticks were not ignited. When these incense sticks are ignited, they move faster because their kinetic energy, there means the kinetic energy of the particles of fragrance get increased. That's why they move faster and they move at a longer distance. So, as a result, we can smell the fragrance of the incense sticks at a distance without going closer to it. Okay. Let us perform activity number 2 to study second characteristic of particles of matter. That is, particles of matter are continuously moving. In this activity, we have to take clear water in glass beaker and we have to add blue ink into this water. As soon as we add this blue ink into this water, it starts mixing with this water, and this blue colored solution of water and ink is formed. We have to repeat this experiment with honey. In this case, we have taken water in this glass and we have added honey into it. When we add honey into this water, it does not mix with this water rapidly, but it takes time. This is not the case with the ink. Why this has happened? Because the particles of honey are moving slowly as compared to the particles of ink. So, the particles of honey are occupying space between the particles of water at a slower rate than the rate of these ink particles. Ink particles are occupying the space between the water particles at a higher rate. So in short, we can say that particles of blue ink are moving faster than the particles of honey. Okay. Let us perform activity 3 To study second characteristic of particles of matter, which is particles of matter are continuously moving. In this activity, we have taken two glass beakers. In these two glass beakers, we have poured water. But in this glass beaker, there is a hot water, and in this glass beaker, there is a cold water. We have to add potassium permanganate crystals into these two beakers at a time. We have to add potassium permanganate crystals into these two beakers at a time. After some time, we observe that whole of this hot water has become purple because of the potassium permanganate crystal. But the cold water is not changing to purple. Only partially it has become purple. Means the potassium permanganate has not mixed fully with the water. Why this has happened? This is because the kinetic energy of the particles of water when it is hot is more. In other words, the particles of hot water are moving faster than the particles of a cold water. When the particles of hot water are moving faster, then the potassium permanganate crystals can occupy the space between the particles of water easily. That's why the hot water has been colored earlier than the cold water. Okay. Thus, we have studied second characteristic of particles of matter, that is, particles of matter are continuously moving. With the help of these three activities. From this study, we can draw some important conclusions. So, let's go through them. First conclusion is, particles of matter are continuously moving. That is, they possess what we called kinetic energy. This is the first conclusion. Is the particles of matter are continuously moving as they have kinetic energy. Because of the kinetic energy, they are moving. The particles of a matter have kinetic energy. Kinetic energy means energy possessed by the particles because of their motion. They are moving. The particles of matter are moving. That's why they are having kinetic energy. Second conclusion is, with increase in temperature, the kinetic energy of the particles also increases. When we increase the temperature of the particles, or we increase the temperature of the matter, the temperature of its particle also increase. That's why they start moving fastly. The particles of a matter starts moving fastly. As a result of that, the kinetic energy of the particles of matter gets increased. Means temperature, when we increase the temperature of the matter, the particles of a matter starts moving fastly and their kinetic energy is increased. Okay. Intermixing of particles of two different types of matter on their own is called diffusion. Earlier we have performed the activity of adding the ink, blue ink, to the water. So in that case, what happens? The ink particles occupy the space between the particles of matter on their own, and the solution of water and ink is formed. That is, blue colored solution is formed. This mixing of ink particles with the particles of water is called diffusion. This is called diffusion. And we have performed other activity with potassium permanganate and water. In that also, the potassium permanganate crystals occupy the space between the particles of water, and the solution becomes purple. Okay. And we did that experiment with hot water and cold water. In case of hot water, the solution becomes purple faster. This is because when the water is hot, the particles of hot water are moving faster. And because of that, the crystals of potassium permanganate can occupy the space between these particles of hot water easily. That is also called diffusion. And this diffusion increases when temperature of the water is increased. Means it depends on, diffusion depends on the rate of diffusion depends on the temperature of the particles. Okay. Thus, we have gone through the conclusion. Third characteristic of particles of matter is particles of matter attract each other. Let us study this characteristic with the help of few activities. In the first activity, we are using this iron nail. Is it possible to break this iron nail in two parts with the help of our hands? Obviously, it is not possible. Why it is not possible to break this nail with our hands? The reason for this is that there is a force of attraction, or there is a strong attraction between the particles of iron. So these particles attract each other with a great force. In other words, we can say that there is a strong attraction between the particles of iron. Okay, let us consider this chalk. Is it possible to break this chalk, the chalk we use to write on blackboard? This is the chalk. Is it possible to break this chalk with the help of our hands? Yes, easily it can be broken with our hands. We don't have to apply a large force to break it. As in case of iron nail, if we want to break this iron nail, then we have to apply great force with the help of some instrument. Then only it can be broken. But in the case of this chalk, it is not the case. We can break this chalk with the help of our hands. Why this is possible? This is possible because there is a less attraction between the particles of this chalk. The force of attraction between the particles of chalk is weak. So we can break this with our hands. Let us consider this example of rubber band. Is it possible to break this rubber band with our hand? Yes, it's possible. But it will require some amount of force. We have to make some effort to break this rubber band. It is elastic. It will increase in length when we apply force to it to break it. But ultimately it will break when we apply force till beyond certain limit. It will break definitely. But the force of attraction in this rubber band is lesser than this iron nail and more than this chalk. Okay. Now let us move on to this example of water. We can see a water surface. This is the water surface. Is it possible to break, or is it possible to cut this water surface into two parts with the help of stick? If we apply the force with the help of stick and we want to break this water surface into two parts, is it possible? Not at all. It is not possible because the particles of water have attraction between them. Because of that force of attraction, the surface of water will remain intact even if we are applying force to it. Okay, so there exists a force of attraction, or there exists attraction between the particles of matter. Okay. So, conclusion from the activities that we performed recently are as follows. First conclusion is particles of matter have force acting between them. This force keeps the particles together. Second conclusion is the strength of this force of attraction varies from one kind of matter to another. We studied that force of attraction in case of that iron nail is very much more than the force in case of chalk. The particles of chalk are not very strongly connected to each other, but the particles of iron are strongly connected to each other. Okay, so we have studied characteristics of particles of matter. In the next video, we will learn states of matter. Dear students, if you found this video useful, then like, share and subscribe to this video so that other students like you studying in 9th class can take benefit of it. Thank you. See you in the next video.